Minecraft horror story, The Stalker in the Shadows. Steve noticed the missing torch before he noticed the footprints. He had placed a torch on every sixth block of the tunnel. He always did. The rule made long mining trips easier because he could look back and know which way led home. Yet one torch was gone from the wall, leaving a dark space between two pools of light. Beneath that space, a line of black footprints crossed the stone floor. They were not the square marks of boots. They were long and narrow, almost like the prints of a person stretched to twice the proper height. They began at the wall, crossed the tunnel, and ended at another wall. There was no opening on either side. Steve raised his iron pickaxe and tapped the stone around the last print. Every block was solid. "Mara," he called through voice chat, "did you come down to level 12? Her answer came from far above. "I have been planting potatoes for the last hour." "Why?" "Nothing. I must have broken a torch by mistake." Steve said it because it was easier than explaining the prints. Their survival world was 63 Minecraft days old. He, Mara, and Cole had built a strong base on a plain beside a village. They had diamond tools, a wheat field, 2 iron golems, and a wall high enough to stop every normal mob. Nothing could enter without ringing the bell beside the gate. It was the safest world Steve had ever made. That was what he believed when he climbed out of the mine near sunset. The sky was orange above the square roofs of the village. Farmers walked back to their houses. Cole stood on the wall, placing the last row of stone bricks. Mara moved between the crop rows with a hoe in one hand. Everything looked normal until Steve turned toward the oak tree beyond the river. A man stood under it. He was almost 3 blocks tall. A long black coat hung from his shoulders and covered most of his legs. His hat had a wide, flat edge that hid the top of his face. The rest of him was darker than the shade beneath the tree. Steve could see 2 round white eyes and a wide row of white teeth. In the man's right hand was a knife. Its blade caught the last light of the sun. Steve stopped walking. The man lifted one hand and waved. "Do either of you see that?" Steve asked. Cole looked down from the wall. "See what?" "Under the oak, across the river." Mara turned first. She stared at the tree for several seconds. "There is nothing there." Steve looked again. The man was gone. Only the oak remained, its leaves moving in the evening wind. For a moment Steve wondered if the shape had been a dark gap between the trunk and the leaves. Then he saw that something had been cut into the bark. Even from across the river, the pale marks were easy to read. 3 long lines formed a smile. The first night. Steve did not tell the others about the face or the knife. Cole would laugh, and Mara would spend half the night searching the game files for a broken texture. Steve wanted one normal evening before they turned the sighting into a problem. They closed the gate, fed the animals, and placed their supplies in labeled chests. Cole went to the tower room. Mara slept in the farmhouse. Steve entered the main lodge and checked every corner before he touched his bed. There were torches on all 4 walls. Lanterns hung from the ceiling. No block in the room was dark enough for a hostile mob to spawn. He lay down. The screen faded, but morning did not come. Steve opened his eyes inside a colorless copy of the lodge. The oak planks were gray. The lanterns gave no light. His chests were open, and every one of them was empty. He tried to stand, but his body would not move from the bed. There was someone at the foot of it. The tall man had to bend his neck beneath the ceiling. His coat touched the floor. His eyes were larger now, two white circles fixed on Steve. The smile was gone. He did not move at first. Then he raised the knife and slowly pointed it at the wall behind Steve. Words appeared across the planks as if an unseen hand were carving them. "You left me in the dark." Steve forced his arm to move. He reached for the diamond sword beside the bed, but his fingers passed through it. The man leaned closer. His eyes filled Steve's view. A low laugh came from every side of the room at once. Steve woke with his sword in his hand. Morning light filled the lodge. Cole was pounding on the door. "Are you alive in there?" he shouted. "The sun has been up for 2 minutes." Steve opened the door. Cole stepped back when he saw the sword. "Bad dream." Steve looked at the wall behind his bed. The words were gone, but the 4 torches in the room had been moved. Each one now hung above the bed, making a tight square of light. The rest of the lodge was full of shadows. "Someone came inside," Steve said. Cole laughed once, then stopped when he saw Steve's face. The doors were locked. "I know." Mara arrived carrying a loaf of bread. "There is something else. The bell log fired at midnight." They had connected the gate bell to a line of redstone lamps. Each lamp marked one opening of the gate. The system was simple. If anyone entered at night, a lamp stayed on until morning. All 12 lamps were glowing. "It says the gate opened 12 times," Mara said, "but it is still barred from the inside." Cole drew his axe. The joke had left his voice. "Then we check the wall." They searched the whole base. No stone had been broken. No door stood open. The villagers were safe. The animals were alive. And both iron golems remained beside the well. They found only one change. A chest had appeared outside Steve's lodge. It was a small oak chest with no sign above it. Inside lay a glass bottle filled with 3 white pills. A yellow flower had been painted on the label. Beside the bottle was a book. The first page held one sentence. "If you see him, do not let him know." The second page was worse. "He likes it when you look back." Cole shut the book. "This is a prank." "By whom?" Mara asked. Cole pointed at Steve. "Maybe by him." "I was asleep." "You said you were asleep?" Steve looked beyond Cole toward the dark doorway of the animal barn. 2 white eyes floated inside it. Below them, teeth slowly appeared, one after another, until the full smile hung in the black. Steve did not react. He remembered the line in the book. "Do not let him know." "We should burn the chest," he said, keeping his voice level. The smile in the barn grew wider. Mara picked up the bottle. "Not until we know what these do." The eyes vanished when she turned toward the barn. The watchers. For the next 3 days, Steve saw the man everywhere. He stood between birch trunks while Steve gathered wood. He watched from the mouth of the mine while Steve repaired the railway. Once at noon, he appeared on top of the village church. Full sunlight covered the roof, yet his body stayed black. He lifted his knife and tapped its flat side against his hat. No villager looked up. Steve followed the warning in the book. He did not point. He did not stare. He recorded each sighting on a map in the storage room. Every mark formed a wide circle around the base. Mara believed him after the animals began acting strangely. Wolves sat facing empty corners. Horses refused to enter the barn after dark. One morning they found every sheep pressed against the same fence, staring toward the oak across the river. Cole still insisted another player had entered the world and hidden with an invisibility effect. An invisible player cannot move torches through locked doors, Mara said. A command block can. We have never enabled commands. Then the world is damaged. World damage does not carry a knife. Cole had no answer for that. They tried to prove the sightings were real. Mara built lookout posts around the wall and placed daylight sensors beside note blocks. Cole ran tripwires through the grass. Steve carried a spyglass and kept his view low. They planned to catch the figure at a distance before it could vanish. The plan failed on the first evening. One note block sounded near the river. Steve and Mara climbed the east tower while Cole ran to the gate. The man stood under the oak again, exactly where Steve had first seen him. His white eyes faced the base. His knife hung at his side. "I see the tree," Mara said. "I see the tripwire moving. I do not see a man." Steve handed her the spyglass. "Look beside the trunk." Mara raised it. Her face changed. "What?" Steve asked. She lowered the glass. There was a face. Only for a second. Across the river, the man turned his head toward her. The note blocks around the entire base began sounding at once. Cole shouted from below. Black figures were rising from the grass. They were shorter than the man, about the height of a player, but they had no eyes, mouths, or clothes. A dozen of them walked toward the wall from every direction. They did not run. They did not make mob sounds. When arrows struck them, they broke apart like smoke, then formed again several blocks closer. "Inside," Mara yelled. The three players ran for the lodge. Cole slammed the iron door and dropped the bar. Dark hands pressed against every window. They left no marks on the glass, but the room became colder each time one touched it. Steve opened the book from the strange chest. A third page had appeared. "When the small ones comb, your mind is already open." Below the sentence was a rough drawing of a dandelion. Half its petals were black. Steve looked at the corner of his view. A small yellow flower now floated above his hunger bar. It had not been there before. 3 of its petals were dark. "Do you see a flower on your screen?" he asked. Cole shook his head. Mara did the same. The hands at the windows stopped moving. From the roof came 3 slow knocks. Then a voice spoke above Steve's head. It was soft, cheerful, and far too close. "Found you. The buried room." At dawn, all the black figures were gone. The roof held no footprints, but one ceiling plank above Steve's bed had been cut into the shape of a door. Cole broke it. Behind the plank was a narrow shaft leading down, not up. "That cannot be right," Mara said. The lodge had 1 floor. The shaft should have opened to the sky, yet a ladder dropped into darkness beneath them. Steve threw a torch through the opening. It fell for 6 seconds before striking stone. Cole wanted to seal the hole. Steve wanted answers. Mara sided with Steve, though she insisted they take armor, food, milk, and blocks. They climbed down one at a time. The shaft passed through spaces that should not have existed. Steve saw the lodge walls slide by on one side and the outside sky on the other, but the ladder kept descending through both. At the bottom was a small room made of deep slate bricks. A single lantern stood on the floor. Shelves held rotten food. Empty bottles and books signed by a player named Gideon. Dust covered everything except a wooden chair facing the wall. On that wall, someone had drawn the tall man again and again. In the first picture, he stood far away between trees. In the second, he stood outside a window. In the third, he leaned over a bed. In the last, he had no eyes. There was only the smile and the raised knife. Mara opened Gideon's first book. "He calls it the man from the shadow," she said. "He says it does not enter a world. It grows inside one." Steve took the book and read. The pages described the same events they had seen: a missing light, prints that crossed solid walls, a stranger too dark for the sun. Gideon had tried fences, golems, lava, and commands. Nothing touched the creature because it was not fully present. It lived in the victim's sight and used every unlit block as a door. The yellow flower measured sanity. When its last petal turned black, the man gained a body. Before that happened, the pills could force him away. The final warning had been underlined so hard that the paper was torn. 1 pill makes him quiet. 2 pills make him angry. 3 pills make him real. Steve looked at the bottle in Mara's hand. It still held all 3. A laugh moved through the room. The lantern went out. White eyes opened behind Cole. Steve did not think. He grabbed the bottle, shook 1 pill into his hand, and swallowed it. The darkness flashed white. The man disappeared. The flower in the corner of Steve's view turned bright yellow again. For the first time in days, the world became silent. Then Cole looked down at the stone floor. Fresh knife marks ran from the place where the man had stood to Steve's boots. The quiet days. The pill worked so well that Steve almost convinced himself the danger had ended. For 4 days he saw no white eyes, no grin, and no dark figures. The flower in the corner of his view stayed yellow. Torches remained where he placed them. The bell log showed no false entries. Even the animals returned to their normal pens. Cole used the silence as proof that a broken effect had fixed itself. Mara did not agree. She copied every page from Gideon's books and moved the original volumes to an ender chest. Then she sealed the hidden shaft with obsidian. The ladder still existed beneath them, but no one wanted to use it again. Steve tried to enjoy the peace. He repaired the mine, finished an enchanting room, and helped Cole complete the wall. Yet the calm felt thin. He could not enter a dark room without waiting for eyes to open. He could not pass the oak across the river without checking the shade beneath its leaves. On the 5th morning, he found a pill on his pillow. It looked exactly like the one he had swallowed. The bottle still held 2, so the new pill had come from somewhere else. Steve carried it outside with a pair of tongs and dropped it into a campfire. The pill did not burn. It rested between the coals while the fire bent away from it. Mara covered it with a stone block. When she broke the block a minute later, the pill was gone. Gideon wrote that the medicine came from the man, she said. Maybe taking it did not drive him away. Maybe it let him in deeper. "The flower is full," Steve replied. "A flower he put on your screen. We do not know what full means." Cole walked over carrying 3 stacks of glass. "It means Steve is not seeing monsters. That is good enough for me. We have a stronghold to find." Their original plan had been to reach the end before day 100. Cole wanted blaze rods from the Nether Fortress, and Steve wanted a reason to leave the base. They packed food, shields, bows, and fire resistance potions. Mara stayed behind to watch the village. The Nether felt almost safe. There were no knights, no beds, and few true shadows. Lava lit the wide caverns. Cole led the way across a stone bridge toward the fortress, while Steve watched for ghasts. Halfway across, Steve heard the laugh. He stopped. Cole kept walking. "Did you hear that?" Steve asked. A ghast? No, him. Cole turned. "There is nobody here." Steve looked into the lava below. A black shape stood on its surface without burning. Hat, coat, eyes, smile. The man from the shadow looked up at Steve and raised his knife. Then he cut the lava. The bright lake split down the middle like a red curtain. Behind it was the oak tree from the overworld. A second Steve stood beneath the branches, facing away. The man stepped through the opening and placed one hand on the other Steve's shoulder. Steve blinked. The vision vanished. The lava rolled below them as if nothing had happened. "Your flower," Cole said. One yellow petal had turned black. Steve had not told Cole that the symbol was still present. The fact that Cole could see it now frightened him more than the vision. "It is above your head," Cole said, "like a name tag." The petal turned yellow again, and the symbol vanished from Cole's sight. They continued to the fortress, but Steve no longer trusted what he saw. Twice he nearly shot at Cole because a tall black shape seemed to walk behind him. At a crossing, Steve saw a safe stone path where Cole saw an open drop. He tested it with a block. The block fell into lava. The path had never been there. They returned without blaze rods. The glass trap. Mara had found another entry in Gideon's books. It described a way to prove when the creature was close. Light did not stop it, but it forced the man to use an existing shadow. A room made of glass, lit from every side, gave him nowhere to stand. Cole turned the idea into a trap. They built a glass chamber in the center of the village. Glowstone covered the floor and ceiling. Lanterns surrounded all four sides. In the middle stood a pressure plate connected to bells, pistons, and 4 dispensers loaded with arrows. Cole also placed an iron golem beside the entrance. "If he can become solid, this catches him," Cole said. "And if he cannot?" Steve asked. "Then we learn that too." Steve entered the chamber alone at midnight. Mara and Cole watched from a platform 20 blocks away. The glass reflected Steve from every direction. He held a sword in one hand and Gideon's book in the other. Nothing happened for the first 10 minutes. Then all 4 reflections smiled. Steve was not smiling. The reflections turned their heads toward the same corner of the chamber. A black line spread across the glowstone at Steve's feet. It grew from the small shadow beneath his boots. First came 2 long legs, then a coat. Shoulders rose behind him. A hat opened like a dark roof above his head. The man unfolded from Steve's own shadow. Steve spun and swung his sword. The blade passed through the black body. The man remained inches away, grinning down at him. He placed the knife against Steve's shield and pulled it slowly across the wood. The shield made no sound, but a deep cut appeared on its surface. "Now," Steve shouted. Cole fired the trap. Bells rang. Pistons slammed the exits shut. Arrows crossed the chamber from 4 sides. Every arrow passed through the man and struck Steve instead. His armor stopped most of them, but one buried itself in his arm. The iron golem stood outside the glass and watched without anger. The man bent close to Steve's ear. "They cannot save what they cannot see," he whispered. Mara broke the glass with her pickaxe. Cole pulled Steve out while the man sank back into the shadow. The bells continued ringing after the chamber was empty. Steve removed the arrow and drank a healing potion. The cut on his shield was real. Mara placed the shield in a chest as proof. Cole stared at it for a long time. "I saw the arrows change direction," he said. "I did not see him, but something moved them toward you." "You built the trap," Steve said. "I know." That was the first time Cole sounded afraid. The second pill. After the glass trap, the stalking became constant. The man no longer waited at the edge of sight. He appeared inside houses, behind doors, and at the bottom of wells. Steve saw his face between items in crowded chests. He saw the knife rise behind him in the reflection of water. Whenever Steve turned, there was nothing there. Sleep became impossible. The game warned that monsters were nearby, even inside the brightest room. If Steve stayed awake, phantoms circled the base. If he lay in bed, the color drained from the world, and the man stood closer each time. The small shadow people returned too. They crawled along the outside of the wall and slipped through gaps no wider than a fence post. When one touched Steve, it disappeared and took a yellow petal from the flower. Swords did not stop them. Light did not slow them. On day 74, Steve entered the storage room and found Mara standing with her back to him. "We need more lanterns by the south field," he said. Mara did not answer. Steve walked closer. Her arms hung at strange angles. She was half a block taller than she should have been. "Mara?" The figure turned. It wore Mara's armor and skin, but the face beneath her hair was black. White teeth filled it from side to side. A knife pushed out through the sleeve. Steve stepped back. The false Mara rushed at him. He raised his sword, then stopped. At the edge of his view, the real Mara stood in the doorway holding an empty bucket. Steve could not tell which one was real. Both called his name. Both moved toward him. The black petals on the flower spread until only 2 yellow ones remained. Steve grabbed the bottle from his hotbar and swallowed the second pill. The false Mara burst into smoke. The real one caught Steve before he fell. For several seconds, every sound stretched into a low hum. The walls leaned inward. The yellow flower became full again, but black roots appeared beneath it. They curled around Steve's health bar and tightened. Mara took the bottle from his hand. 1 pill remained. "No more," she said. Steve nodded, though the laugh in the ceiling told him the choice might not be his. That evening, they found Cole's armor stand outside the gate. It wore a black coat and a hat made from dark wool. A wooden sword had been placed in its hand like a knife. Cole tore it down and threw every piece into the river. When he returned to his tower, the armor stand was waiting beside his bed. The missing player. Cole vanished on day 76. He had been working below the south wall, widening a tunnel that led from the village to the river. Mara heard him call through voice chat shortly after midnight. "Steve is down here," Cole said. "He says he found another room." Steve was standing beside Mara when the message came. "Get out of the tunnel," Steve told him. Cole did not answer. They ran to the south wall. The tunnel entrance stood open, and Cole's tools lay on the steps. His voice still came through chat, but it sounded far away. "Steve, why are you walking backward?" Then came the sound of a sword striking stone. Cole shouted once. His connection icon turned grey. There was no death message. Steve and Mara followed the tunnel with shields raised. It should have ended at the river after 40 blocks. Instead, it continued for hundreds. The stone changed to deep slate, then to black blocks neither player could identify. Torches broke as soon as they were placed. They found Cole's helmet first. His chest plate lay 20 blocks farther on. A trail of dropped bread, arrows and redstone dust led into the dark. At the end of it stood Cole. He faced the wall. His player name floated above his head. "Do not touch him," Mara whispered. Cole turned. His face looked normal, but his eyes did not move. "He showed me the way out," he said. "Come toward us," Steve replied. "There is no us." Cole raised his hand. A white pill rested in his palm. "He says 3 will let me see the real world." The man from the shadow stepped from behind Cole. He placed both hands on Cole's shoulders and smiled over his head. Steve rushed forward. Mara tried to stop him, but he pulled free. Cole swallowed the pill. The tunnel shook. Black hands pushed through the walls. Cole's skin faded until he looked like one of the smaller shadow people. His name vanished. For 1 second he reached towards Steve as if asking for help. The man drew the knife across the air. Cole broke apart into dark particles. His remaining items fell to the ground. A death message appeared at last. Cole was taken somewhere better. Steve swung his sword at the man. Once again, the blade passed through him. The grin opened wider. "Not real enough," the man said. The walls filled with white eyes. Mara grabbed Steve and pulled him back. They ran while the tunnel changed behind them. Doors appeared in the walls, each one opening onto a different piece of their world. Steve saw the farm on fire, the village buried in snow, and Cole standing alive inside the glass trap. Every false Cole begged Steve to stop. Steve kept running. They reached the steps at sunrise. The long tunnel snapped back to its normal length the moment they crossed into the village. Behind them was only a short stone passage to the river. Cole's name remained grey in the player list. His tower was empty except for a sign on the bed. "One more pill, Steve." Mara broke the sign. Another waited beneath it. "Then you can follow him." The map beneath the village. Steve wanted to destroy the last pill, but nothing damaged it. Fire bent away. Cactus blocks would not take it. An explosion threw every other item from the test room and left the pill floating in the center. Even the void below the world refused it. When Steve dropped the bottle through a hole in bedrock that had appeared inside the strange tunnel, the bottle fell for a moment and returned to his inventory. Mara stopped trying to remove it. "He wants you to carry it. That does not mean you have to use it." Cole used one. "Cole heard a false version of you. The man learned how to separate us. We stay together now." They moved into the village church and covered the windows with glass panes. Both iron golems stood outside. Mara set a bell beside each bed. Steve placed Cole's last diamond beside a candle on the lectern. That night, neither of them slept. At midnight, Cole joined the world. His name turned white in the player list. A message appeared in chat. "Cole, I found paradise." Mara reached for the keyboard. Steve stopped her. Another message came. Cole, it is under the city. A map appeared on the lectern. It showed the village, the river, and a black square deep beneath the mountain to the north. In one corner was a drawing of the man's smiling face. Steve knew it was bait. He also knew the creature would keep attacking until the last petal went dark. Gideon's hidden room had offered no way to defeat it, but the map suggested there were more answers below. We go at dawn, he said. That is what he wants. He wants me alone. You said we stay together. Mara looked at Cole's diamond on the lectern. We find the truth. We do not follow his voice, and you do not take the pill. The church bell rang by itself. Outside the glass, the man stood between the iron golems. One golem looked through him, the other walked around him as if he were an empty block. The man pressed the point of his knife against the window. A crack followed the blade. For the first time, he had marked something without touching Steve. The second pill had made him stronger. The city under the mountain. Steve and Mara left before sunrise. They carried only what they could afford to lose. Diamond armor, food, wool, healing potions, ladders, 2 ender pearls, and Cole's pickaxe. The last pill stayed in Steve's inventory because it refused to stay anywhere else. The black mark on the map led them to a cave behind a frozen waterfall. At first, the route looked natural. Coal and iron lined the walls. Bats moved above an underground stream. Farther down, the stone gave way to deep slate and blue skulk. The cave became so quiet that every step sounded wrong. They covered the floor with wool and moved slowly. A shrieker waited beside the first ruined wall. Beyond it stood an ancient city. Steve had seen ancient cities before, but not one like this. Black banners hung from the towers. Each banner showed a white smile. Stone statues wore wide hats. The paths were lined with unlit lanterns, all facing a large frame of reinforced blocks in the center. The frame looked like a doorway, though no portal filled it. Black mist moved inside the opening. Steve could hear a crowd whispering on the other side. Mara pointed toward a camp built beneath a ruined bridge. Someone lived here. The camp held a bed, a crafting table, and 6 empty pill bottles. Gideon's name was carved into the bed frame. A final book rested in a barrel with a broken compass and a yellow flower. Steve opened it. Gideon had reached the city after months of being watched. The man had promised to return people Gideon had lost in older worlds. It called the place beyond the dark frame paradise. Gideon entered and found copies of every home he had abandoned, every animal he had failed to protect, and every player he had watched die. None of them were real. They were memories wearing bodies. The creature could use regret to make a world inside a player's mind. The pills cut away the visions for a time, but each dose also gave those visions more weight. After the 3rd dose, the man gained a true body. He could open doors, break blocks, and kill. Yet a true body came with a weakness. For a short time, the world could touch him too. Gideon's last paragraph ended in the middle of a sentence. If I take the 3rd pill beside the shriekers, the warden may hear. Steve and Mara looked toward the skulk-covered streets. He was going to make the man real, Mara said, then use the warden against him. Did it work? 6 empty bottles answered the question. A minecart rolled along a broken rail behind them. Cole sat inside it. His armor was gone. His skin had become dark and flat. but his face looked like coals again. The cart stopped without touching a powered rail. "You took your time," he said. Mara raised her bow. "That is not coal." "I remember the tower," the figure replied. "I remember the wall. I remember Steve leaving me in the tunnel." Steve felt the flower lose a petal. "I tried to reach you," he said. "You ran. You were already gone." The false coal smiled. White teeth pushed through his face. "That is what you tell yourself." All around the city, shapes rose from the skulk. Shadow people filled the streets. Some wore pieces of Cole's armor. Others looked like villagers from the base. None made a sound. Mara fired. Her arrow passed through the false Cole and struck the minecart. The clang set off a sensor beneath the rail. One shrieker screamed. The figures stopped. The false Cole stepped from the cart. "He is coming." The chase through the ruins. They ran before the darkness effect covered their view. Steve and Mara moved across wool paths, under stone arches and through rooms packed with skulk. The shadow people followed without setting off a single sensor. They did not need to touch the floor. Their feet hovered a thin line above it. A second shrieker sounded somewhere behind them. Steve's view darkened. In the black, he saw the man's white eyes moving from one side of the street to the other. The creature was keeping pace without running. Each time the darkness faded, it stood closer. They reached a tall icebox near the city wall and climbed the ladder inside. Mara broke the ladder below them. Shadow hands pushed through the packed ice, but could not find a grip. "One more warning and the warden comes," she whispered. "We need the man beside us when it happens. He is never far from you." Steve checked the flower. One yellow petal remained. A knife point came through the ice beside his face. The blade cut down. The wall opened. The man from the shadow leaned through the gap, but his body remained thin, like smoke pressed into the shape of a person. Steve struck him with Cole's pickaxe. The tool went through the coat and hit the opposite wall. The man grabbed the handle. His fingers were not fully solid, but they were strong enough to hold it. Steve pulled. The man pulled back. The flower's last petal flickered between yellow and black. Mara threw a healing potion against the creature. Pink particles passed through him. He laughed and forced the knife farther into the box. "Steve," Mara said, "the pill." "Gideon failed." "Gideon took 6. You have taken 2. The man ripped Cole's pickaxe from Steve's hands and dropped it into the street. Then he reached through the wall and closed his fingers around Mara's arm. Black marks spread over her armor. Steve drew his sword and cut at the hand. The blade met nothing. The man pulled Mara halfway through the ice. "Take it," she shouted. Steve opened the bottle. The creature's smile trembled. For the first time, it looked uncertain. Steve understood. The man wanted the third pill, but only after Steve had entered the dark doorway. Here, beside the shriekers, a body could become a prison. Steve swallowed the final pill. The flower turned black. The entire city changed. Color drained from the stone. Every lantern flashed white. The small shadow people screamed and vanished. The man's coat dropped with sudden weight, tearing the ice beneath his feet. His eyes sank into real sockets. His boots struck the ground. The knife became bright metal instead of light inside a vision. Steve swung his sword. This time it hit. The blow knocked the man away from Mara. He landed in the street and stared at the cut across his coat. Black particles poured from it. Then his eyes disappeared. Only the huge white grin remained. The man charged. The third warning. Steve and Mara jumped from the icebox as the knife cut through it. They landed on wool and ran toward the center of the city. The man followed with long, uneven steps. He was faster now. His coat struck the stone behind him. Each sweep of the knife broke blocks from walls and railings. "The shrieker by the portal," Mara called. Steve saw it beside the reinforced frame. They needed sound, but the wool covered the street. He took Cole's diamond from his pocket and threw it onto bare deepslate. The small item struck with a faint click. The sensor lit. The third shrieker opened. Its cry rolled across the city. Darkness covered Steve's sight. A deep roar answered from beneath the ground. The man from the shadow stopped. His grin closed for 1 second. Skulk split beside the portal. A warden pulled itself from the floor, towering over the black frame. It sniffed the air and listened. Steve and Mara crouched on the wool. The man did not. He took 1 step toward Steve. The warden turned its head. The man raised his knife. The warden roared and attacked. Its arms struck the black figure and threw him through a stone pillar. For the first time, the man's laugh became a sound of pain. He rose and drove the knife into the warden's chest. The blade entered, but the warden did not fall. It hit him again. Steve and Mara crawled away while the two creatures fought. Each impact shook dust from the towers. The warden followed sound and scent. The man moved like a broken shadow forced to obey solid ground. He could no longer vanish when struck. They reached the rail beside Gideon's camp. An old minecart waited there, and the track climbed into a tunnel leading upward. Mara placed the last powered rails from her pack. Steve connected them to a redstone torch. The cart began to move. A black hand closed around its back edge. The man had escaped the warden. Half his coat was torn away. One arm hung loose, but the smile had returned. The warden roared behind him and released a blast that struck both the man and the cart. Steve's armor absorbed part of the hit. The minecart flew forward. The man kept hold. Mara hit his hand with her axe. Black fingers fell onto the rail and broke into smoke. The creature dropped away, then rose beside the track much closer than before. "He is still following," Mara shouted. The tunnel climbed in a tight line. The cart was fast, but the man climbed the walls with his knife, pulling himself forward. Darkness flashed across Steve's view. Each time it cleared, the grin was nearer. Steve found 1 block of TNT in Mara's supply box. They had brought it in case the cave closed behind them. He placed it on the rail and set a redstone torch beside it as the cart passed. The man reached the block just as it exploded. Stone filled the tunnel. The track behind them vanished under falling deepslate. A final laugh pushed through the dust, then stopped. The return to the village. The minecart emerged from the mountain shortly after dawn. Steve and Mara left it at the frozen river and ran south. Neither trusted the silence. Steve's flower remained black. The roots around his health bar grew thicker with every minute. They reached the plain by noon. Smoke rose above the village. The wall had been opened from the inside. Houses stood empty. Crops were broken, and every animal faced the church. Both iron golems waited near the well. Dark stains covered their arms. "The shadow people came here while we were gone," Mara said. Steve looked toward the oak across the river. Cole stood beneath it. He wore his armor again. His player name shone white above his head. He raised one hand. "Do not," Mara warned. Cole walked into the river. Water passed through his legs without moving. His face stretched into a grin. The man from the shadow rose behind him. The warden and the explosion had damaged the body but not destroyed it. One white eye remained. The coat was torn. The knife was shorter, its tip broken away. Yet he still crossed the river with slow, certain steps. The false Cole disappeared when the man reached the bank. Steve and Mara backed toward the well. The iron golems did not react. "He is real now," Steve said. "Make them notice." Mara understood. She struck one golem with the flat of her axe and ran behind the man. The golem raised its arms and followed. Steve did the same to the second. The man lunged at Steve. Steve blocked the knife. The damaged blade cut through half the shield. He rolled aside as the first golem swung. Its fist hit the man from the shadow. The creature flew across the path and struck the church wall. The golem had seen him because he now occupied real space. The second golem joined the attack. The man slashed at their iron arms, but they kept moving. Villagers opened their doors. For the first time, they stared at the tall black figure. Bells began ringing all across the village. Sunlight fell directly onto the man's torn coat. Smoke rose from his shoulders. He tried to step into the shadow of the church, but Steve blocked the way. "You wanted to be real," Steve said. "Stay real." The man looked at him with one eye. His grin became thin. Both golems struck together. The body broke into a cloud of black particles. The hat dropped onto the path. The knife landed beside it. Sunlight touched both items, and they burned without flame until nothing remained. The black flower vanished from Steve's view. Every bell stopped at once. What remained? Mara stayed in the world for 3 more days. They repaired the gate, gathered Cole's things, and placed his diamond in a small stone box beneath the tower. No shadow people returned. Steve slept through each night without waking. On the 4th morning, Mara stood beside the river with her inventory packed. "I am leaving this world," she said. "You should come." Steve looked back at the village. They had spent months building it. Leaving felt like giving the creature every block it had tried to take. "Not yet," he said. Mara did not argue. She handed him Gideon's final book and logged out beside the gate. Her player model vanished. Her name disappeared from the list. Steve was alone. Before repairing anything, he returned to the church and opened Gideon's book one last time. A page had appeared after the broken final sentence. The writing was not Gideon's. The letters were neat and deep, as if cut into the paper by the point of a blade. "You let the world touch me." On the next line, the answer continued. "Now I can touch the world." Steve carried the book to the square and placed it under the noon sun. He built a ring of stone around it, filled the center with lava, and watched the pages sink. The cover burned, but the 2 sentences remained in the air after the book was gone. They floated for several seconds as pale marks, then folded into the thin shadow beneath the stone ring. That night, Steve did not use his usual bed. He slept in the church with a golem outside each door. Morning came without a dream. His flower did not return, and no warning appeared above his health. He checked the village before eating. Nothing had moved. He began a careful search for any piece of the creature's body. Black particles still stained the church wall, but water removed them. The path where the hat had fallen held a single dark thread. Steve picked it up with a shovel. The thread twisted toward his hand, so he dropped it into the lava ring. It made the same low laugh he had heard in the mine, then vanished. Steve marked the place with bright blocks and wrote down every detail. He had learned what happened when strange evidence was ignored. He checked the player list every hour in case Cole's name returned. It remained grey for one day, then disappeared completely. Mara's name never came back. On the second evening, a village child placed a yellow flower beside Cole's stone box. Steve had never told the villagers about the symbol. He followed the child to the library, where it pointed at an empty shelf and shook its head. The villagers could not explain what they had seen, but they remembered being afraid. That meant the man had truly crossed into their world for a short time. It also meant the golems had truly destroyed that body. Steve held on to that fact. A body was gone. A knife was gone. The thing that had chased them through the city had been broken beneath the sun. If anything remained, it had no weight and no weapon. It could only watch. Watching, Steve told himself, was not the same as winning. He cut down the oak across the river. He filled the strange tunnel with stone and covered the glass trap with a garden. He placed lanterns in every house and rebuilt the wall 2 blocks higher. For a time, the work helped. Day 83 passed. Then day 84. Nothing watched from the trees. On day 85, Steve entered the mine to replace the torch that had first gone missing. He placed it on the wall and stepped back. The tunnel was bright from end to end. No footprints crossed the floor. Steve turned toward home. His shadow stayed where it was. It stretched across the stone even though the torch was behind it. Long legs formed first. A coat widened around narrow shoulders. A hat rose above the head. Steve did not look back. He walked toward the ladder while a second set of footsteps followed him through the light.